when I was growing up with the mental health, people weren't very honest about it. Like everybody in the family had an Uncle Earl that was in the basement or the attic or the back room. Or you had the neighborhood guy or woman that was walking around talking to themselves. So it was more or less like, you don't see it, ignore it, mind your business. And those that were in the community, they weren't coping with it because they were kind of by themselves.
People were misunderstood. They really didn't understand mental health issues at all. And the family was just like, okay, well, they have special issues. You know, don't go around so-and-so because, you know, they may say something that's like really crazy. In the schools, you see that the classes were separated and these were just the bad kids, but not realizing that they had conduct disorder or other mental health issues that weren't addressed. In the communities, and families, I noticed that it was kind of like intertwined where they had substance abuse issues, because of underlying mental health issues.
Because I feel like a lot of people were suffering. I think as kids, and especially in the Black community, we usually don't like to say people are suffering, or we usually don't like to say they have a mental illness. So we kind of pretend like it's not there, and we kind of pretend like it's the norm. You know, I've known a lot of people who have dealt with death or some type of trauma, and they suffer in silence because it's not something that we really talk about in the community. So growing up, I've seen a lot of people suffering in silence, but it's been brushed under the rug and not really talked about. And I think that that's an issue. As I got older and I think back on these situations, and I'm like, you know what? I do remember that one time when they did say this or they did do this, and that was kind of odd. But at the time, we were little, and it just wasn't a thing.
I mean, I didn't know at the time. I didn't even know things I was going through at the time. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about mental health. I mean, you know, when you're young, and mental health is stigmatized. So if something's wrong with you or somebody's seeing a counselor, you're retarded, in quotes. I mean, but it wasn't until I got older I started realizing that these things weren't normal. When I went to my undergrad program, I went to Southern, which is in New Haven pretty much. But once I went there, I started seeing different people. I mean, and the culture was different. I realized a lot of things I was doing or people in my community were doing and the way they cope with things, you know, the drinking, smoking, doing different things like that. I mean, those weren't normal things. I mean, it's a lot of things people are going through right now, I mean, communities that they don't even realize that they're depressed. They have issues with anxiety or, you know, some bipolar. It could be a lot of different things they're going through, but they don't even know. I mean, so they're coping through alcohol, drugs, being abusive physically, verbally. You know?
To my knowledge, I haven't really known or seen that much. That's the thing with mental health. Like, it doesn't kind of just shoot out. It doesn't just stand out a lot. It doesn't just like, you know, hit you in the face like, hey, that person has whatever. So I could have maybe seen people with PTSD or depression or anxiety or things like that. But
it makes me think back. Probably had to be like 12 years old. I had a peer that kind of used to hang like an inner city area with my cousins and I. He actually had committed suicide. So at that age, I really didn't have any knowledge of it, but like it would have been important for myself and my parents and everybody that knew him at that crucial age range to kind of have some type of knowledge and have some access to some type of resource to be able to cope with that. Because literally when I found out, it was just like, I just found out and dealt with it. But I remember feeling really sad, and I kind of was like, wow, you know, I kind of don't want to go in this area. But I mean, outside of that, one of the major ways that I've seen a lot of people kind of cope with mental health in certain areas in African American community would be through substance use, which is still definitely prevalent now within various communities, but primarily in African American community. Ideally, like self-medicating to, for instance, somebody with ADHD. I mean, they might be like a heavy cannabis user, ideally, because they might think that, you know, cannabis ideally naturally kind of relaxes someone and makes them feel calm. So they might think, I'm just going to self-medicate through using cannabis, as opposed to being on a medication or being on a pill, because of course there's a stigma.
But my mom, she went back to school when I was pretty young, so I was left home with my grandmother, who has paranoid schizophrenia, and my aunt, who had bipolar disorder. So I was raised by them, and they weren't always on their medication, so definitely saw it at home. In school, thinking back, there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, but nothing I would have recognized. I wasn't guarded at all. I wasn't protected from it. So my grandmother, she would tell me how she felt. She would have conversations with herself at the dinner table or we were having breakfast. Her medication was always out on the table, and I was always kind of inquisitive, like, oh, what's that? Oh, that's to keep me from talking to myself, or oh, that's to keep me from, killing somebody. I'm like, oh, okay. So I wasn't guarded.